When most of us think about water pollution, we think about wastewater discharges from power plants, sanitary sewer treatment facilities, or factories. While these sources of pollution are important, construction sites have their own potential environmental impacts. Unless appropriate measures are taken, erosion can carry soils and sediments off construction sites and into our rivers, streams, and lakes. We've all seen bare ground that shows rills where soil has been eroded. Well, guess where that soil went? Into a river, stream, or lake somewhere downhill. Clearing and grading the landscape at a construction site can increase the erosion rate by as much as 1,000 times. And that soil and sediment can silt up stream beds, destroy fish and wildlife habitat, and make sources of drinking water more difficult and expensive to clean up. Construction sites manage these sources of pollution by controlling the ground. That is, controlling the sources of potential pollution on the ground at each job site. The Environmental Protection Agency, the EPA, along with state and municipal environmental agencies, have developed regulations to make sure the construction industry effectively implements ground control. To make sure soils, sediments, and other potential pollutants are kept out of our surface waters. Under the authority of the Clean Water Act, the same act that regulates wastewater discharges from those power plants and factories, the EPA requires that construction projects that disturb more than 1 acre of surface area put in place measures to protect nearby streams and rivers from soil erosion and pollution. And some local jurisdictions impose erosion control requirements on even smaller projects. Before commencing any work at a site, the owner or the general contractor must obtain coverage under a general permit for stormwater discharges from construction activities. This permit is issued by the EPA or state environmental agency and sets out what must be done at the job site to protect stormwater runoff from polluting our streams and rivers. You can see a copy of this permit for yourself at most job sites. Often, it is posted right at the front gate for all to see. One requirement of this permit is that each construction site must develop a stormwater pollution prevention plan before the project even starts. This plan describes the specific control measures that will be installed, operated, and maintained at the site. Once written, this plan becomes part of the permit, and the control measures it describes must be followed to the letter. There are literally dozens of erosion control measures, devices, structures, and practices that can be included in the site stormwater plan, though most plans rely on only a few. The EPA calls these ground control measures Best Management Practices, or BMPs. BMPs can generally be separated into 3 broad categories. First, there are BMPs that prevent or minimize soil erosion from occurring in the first place. Second, there are BMPs that control and capture eroded soils or sediments before they can run off the site. And third, there are BMPs that protect stormwater runoff against pollution resulting from construction materials and wastes. Measures that prevent or minimize soil erosion from occurring include performing topsoil removal, site grading, and contouring in phases to minimize the amount of bare soil that is exposed at any one time. Leaving mature vegetation like trees or strips of grasses in place to stabilize the soil. Placing straw, mulch, woven mats, or fabric over bare areas that are exposed but not yet ready for construction work. Seeding areas that have been graded and prepared but are not scheduled for development until later. And lining drainage channels with riprap, geotextiles, or other protective covers to prevent scour of soils by fast-flowing water. All these BMPs help prevent soil erosion from occurring, but at most sites, some erosion is inevitable despite these preventive measures. Stormwater inevitably picks up soils when it flows across the surface, like the soils being mixed with water in this jar. To remove these sediments, there is a second class of BMPs. Sediment control BMPs operate on a very simple principle. If you let sediment-laden water sit quietly for a while, most of the sediments will drop out or settle by gravity. Silt fence is probably the most obvious sediment control BMP at many sites. Silt fence is made of special fabric that acts as a porous dam, not as a filter as some people believe. It impedes flowing runoff and creates a still body of water upslope of the fence. Silt fence is installed with the lower part trenched in at least 6 inches deep, so it can withstand the force of the water that ponds up behind it. Silt fence that is not thoroughly trenched in and compacted is completely useless. Runoff just passes underneath it. Stakes are driven in on the downhill side of the fence, so the weight of the water does not rip off the fabric. To be effective, the fence is placed well down from the toe of the slope to impound a large volume of water. This large volume gives the sediments and soils time to settle as the silt fence slowly lets clean water drain out. Straw wattles can also be used to slow flowing water and allow sediments to drop out. Detention ponds are another sediment control BMP. They collect runoff and, like silt fence, allow the water to pond and sediments to settle out. Trenching and staking straw bales where runoff flows towards a detention pond can reduce its speed and minimize the amount of sediments that will make it into the pond. Stabilized construction entrances and exits also help prevent soils from leaving the site. Mud, tracked off-site on vehicle tires, is a very easy-to-spot source of pollution. The large stones on the pad essentially scrape soils off vehicle tires as they roll across. Track pads, as they are more often called, are designed at least 70 feet long, with rocks 12 inches deep, so that vehicle tires sink in and get a good scraping. As a last chance BMP, to get sediments that have made it off-site, drop inlet protection devices like these rock bags slow water flowing into storm drain inlets. This allows sediments to drop out on the street rather than run into the storm sewer. Then, these sediments are regularly swept up. The last class of ground-controlled BMPs are those that protect against pollution from industrial-type materials and wastes. Secondary containment structures under and around fuel tanks, as well as containers for paints and other supplies, make sure that leaking containers or material transfer accidents don't allow these pollutants out on the ground, where they can be washed away in the next storm. Make sure that wood, plastic, paper, and other construction waste and debris, as well as candy wrappers, soft drink containers, sandwich bags, and so on, are placed in dumpsters or other collection containers and picked up for proper disposal, or better yet, recycling. Staking down porta potties and placing them where wind or vandals cannot tip them over keeps wastes and sanitation chemicals off the ground. And enforcing designated concrete washout areas, where concrete truck washout will be contained, keeps these wastes on site. All these BMPs protect our environment. In fact, well-designed and properly maintained BMPs will reduce sediments leaving a construction site by 80% or more. So now that you know why all these BMPs are in place at your job site, you may be asking, what's this got to do with me? I don't design BMPs. I don't install them. Well, everyone at the job site has a responsibility to make sure that BMPs are in place and working. Just because they were originally installed properly doesn't mean that they're working today. Even the best BMPs need constant monitoring and regular maintenance. Streets with drop inlet protectors must be regularly swept, silt fence repaired, track pads scraped or new rock added, detention ponds dredged out. Making sure that BMPs are functioning properly is where you come into the picture. Contractor and subcontractor employees are the day-to-day eyes and ears for ground control. You are the ones who are working at the site every day, working right next to these BMPs, and can tell if they are doing their job or not. You are the ones who are most likely to first discover problems like a section of silt fence has been run over and will now allow stormwater runoff and unimpeded pathway off the site. A section of silt fence was damaged or removed while necessary work was being done in the area. A track pad has filled up with soil or has become so compacted that it can no longer scrape mud off vehicle tires. A drop inlet protector has been run over and is not slowing runoff before it enters the storm drain. Hay bales protecting an inlet have been dislodged or had sediments overtop them. Supplies have been removed from their secondary containment and are sitting around where they could be tipped over or damaged and spill out their contents on the ground. Or that a detention pond has nearly filled up with silt and runoff will now just flow right through it. Or a spill, leak, or uncontrolled release of any industrial-type material has occurred. If you spot a situation where a BMP needs repair or maintenance, or where work practices threaten the environment, it's your job to step up and make sure the problem is squarely addressed. BMPs suffer damage, and even when left undisturbed, time and weather take their toll. BMPs are especially susceptible to weather damage because they are often placed right where runoff concentrates. In short, BMPs need to be constantly monitored to ensure they are effective. Know this: no one will be punished for reporting a known or suspected stormwater problem, even a problem that they may have inadvertently caused. If no one working at the site reports a problem, you can be sure it will be spotted by an inspector. Every job site must be regularly inspected for compliance with the conditions of its permit and stormwater plan. Both the contractor and federal, state, or local environmental agencies conduct site inspections. If a regulatory agency inspector discovers the problem first, it can become more than just a maintenance issue. It can become a citation, a notice of violation, or even a monetary fine. Those fines can reach tens of thousands of dollars, and repeated violations can result in job site closure. You are expected to always be on the lookout for erosion problems or BMP failures. Promptly fix or report anything that looks to you like a problem. If it looks like sediments or pollutants could make it off-site, it probably should be reported. Be especially vigilant right after a rain or windstorm. Big storms often cause damage to BMPs. The entire construction industry is committed to protecting the environment. Everyone in the business, from the developers, engineers, and architects, to the general contractor and subcontractors, all want to make sure our industry does everything it can to be a good steward to the environment. And you, the men and women at the job site, you are the eyes and ears for the environment and for management. Keep a sharp eye on every BMP at your job site. If you see one that's damaged, missing, or not working properly, report it right away and see that it gets fixed. At the end of the day, it's your job to implement ground controls and minimize or eliminate these threats to the environment.